Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Mays. I am the clinical director at the Center for Relational Recovery and the founder of Partner Hope. And I am back with another video to talk to you guys about all things related to betrayal trauma. So today we are going to talk about disclosure, and we're going to talk about why disclosure, it's like a never-ending topic, disclosure, right? But why does disclosure sometimes take so long to actually receive and get as a betrayed partner? And why sometimes it is really worth the wait and is of benefit to you that it is taking longer. So we're going to talk about that and why that might be true. Okay? So let's dive in. I'm going to be looking down because I've got notes here in my hand. So the first thing I want to say is, of course, you as a betrayed partner have a need for disclosure. And there are very good reasons why you need disclosure and why you're asking for disclosure. So I want to just validate that need here at the front end and out of the gate and say, yes, you have a right to disclosure, you have a need for disclosure, and that need is real, okay? Here's why it takes a while sometimes to get disclosure. So when you first come into treatment, when the cheating partner first comes into treatment, there are a whole bunch of things that have to happen, and those things need to happen in a certain order. How treatment progresses really, really matters, and the order of things really, really matters. And if you do things out of order, often you end up having to go back and do them again, or you end up like 2 years in and you find out, oh, gosh, we have to go back and do a bunch of stuff that we never did. So doing it in order actually goes much faster. It actually takes you through treatment much more quickly. So when your partner comes in to treatment, the very first thing that's going to happen is they're going to go through an assessment. And that assessment is going to include looking at, are they dealing with an affair or sexual behavior that does not have a compulsive element? So that's one bucket they could fall into. Or are they dealing with an addiction? Are they dealing with a sexual addiction and compulsivity around their sexual behaviors? So determining which of those is true determines sort of the course of treatment for the person. So that's the very first thing that happens, is there's an assessment. And if they're dealing with an addiction, then we're looking at how advanced is the addiction, how severe is the addiction, where has it taken them in terms of their behaviors, how long has it been going on, all of those kinds of things. So that assessment period can take anywhere between 2 and 5 appointments to accomplish, because also often you're giving the person assessments and you're reviewing the assessments with the person. So it isn't just a one and done kind of appointment. Usually it usually takes a couple appointments, if not more, to get it done. So first thing you're doing is you're doing this assessment, and then at the end of the assessment you're going to be given treatment recommendations about, here's what treatment needs to look like for you going forward to deal with this issue. If the person is dealing with an addiction, a sexual addiction, the recommendations are often going to include, if they're staying outpatient, they may be recommended to go to inpatient treatment. But if they're going to stay in outpatient treatment, the recommendations are going to be attending group therapy, attending individual therapy, and often doing the 12 steps, right? Those 3 pieces are sort of foundational to treatment for addiction. If it's not addiction, if it's an affair, if it's other kinds of behaviors that are issues within the relationship, then some of the treatment is going to include individual therapy, often group therapy, and then maybe couples therapy as part of it as well. So out of the assessment comes, here's what's needed to actually treat this issue effectively, and the treatment recommendations are provided. So then, and only then, after all of that, does treatment actually begin, right? So now you're in treatment, the cheating partner, you are now in treatment for this and dealing with it. And this is all assuming that your partner is willing to go into treatment and wants to in some way work on the relationship. So I just want to pause and say, I know that for a lot of people, that's not the story. The cheating partner isn't willing to do treatment, isn't even willing to think about, disclosure, what's that, right? Not even willing about that. So I know that a lot of you deal with that, and that's a topic for another video, right? We'll deal with that another day. What I'm talking about here is for those of you whose partner is willing to come into treatment, does want to work on the relationship and deal with whatever has been going on. So this is sort of the process that people go through with that, and how disclosure fits into that whole process. Okay. So now you're in treatment. You've had the assessment, you've had your treatment recommendations. Now you're in treatment. So the very first task in treatment is to break through denial with the person. So the very first task is to help the person come into reality about the severity of the problem they have, number one, and number two, the level of damage that it's been creating for their loved ones and the people around them. This is a big task. So when people are either in an addiction or in an affair, either one of these, they build within their mind a whole rationalization for why it's okay for them to be doing what they're doing, why what they're doing really isn't that harmful to the people they love, that everybody does this kind of thing, that as long as I don't get caught and nobody knows, nobody will get hurt. This isn't that big of a deal. People cheat all the time. There's a whole world of rationalization for the person who's cheating that is built in their mind around this. And the purpose of that, we call those self-manipulation defenses, right? They're manipulating themselves about what's going on for them. And the reason that they do that, there's kind of two purposes that fills for them. One, it defends against shame. So when they have all these rationalizations and justifications and all of that going on, they don't feel the shame of cheating on the person they love. They don't feel the shame of that, right? It's protecting them from that. Because if they really were to look and see and come into emotional contact with, I've been lying daily for 6 months to the person that I love, and I've been cheating on the person I love and promised that I wouldn't cheat on, and that's what I'm doing, they would feel shame about that. So to protect themselves from shame, they've got all these defenses in their own head. They also are protecting themselves from knowing about the damage that they're causing. That's the second purpose that those self-manipulation defenses serve. They're protecting themselves from knowing how much damage they're actually creating. So usually you're in treatment because something has gotten found out, right? The cheating's been discovered. And in that discovery, now you, as a betrayed partner, you are reeling. You're usually in shock and disbelief and enormous pain and anger about what's happened. And all of a sudden, the cheating partner is like, whoa, like they're now all of a sudden sort of plunged into the reality of how damaging their behavior actually has been. Whereas the self-manipulation defense has protected them from knowing that. So, first task in treatment is to actually work with the cheating partner, the addict, on the way that they've been rationalizing their behavior, the way that they've been lying to themselves about it, the way that they've been avoiding and defending against shame and against knowing what the consequences are for the people that they love. That has to be dismantled first. The person has to begin to identify the ways that they've been lying to themselves and be able to see the part of them that wants to keep on lying to them, because that part is still alive and well in there and wants to keep telling these lies, right? So they have to identify that part and then learn to work with it and to come into honesty and truthfulness with themselves about the problem that they have and the level of severity of the problem that they have, what's actually needed to deal with the problem that they have, because treatment's no joke, right? Treatment is hard work, requires lots of change, requires you to go way outside your comfort zone, give up the addiction, give up the affair. It is a hard process. So the person has to kind of come into knowing and awareness that this is the level of problem that I have, and this is what is actually required to deal with it. So that's the very first thing that we're doing in treatment when somebody comes in who is dealing with an addiction or has been in an affair, is we're just helping them come into awareness about what's really been going on in their life, how severe the problem is, and what's required to deal with it, and that they've got to start to get honest with themselves and with others. Okay, task number 1. Task number 2, when they're coming into treatment, is you got to get sober. Okay, you actually have to get sober and stop the behaviors. So if you're not an addict and you've been, let's say you've been in an affair, doesn't have a compulsive component to it, you still have to really thoroughly end that affair. So there has to be a process of ending it, of closing the door on it, of turning your focus and energy back to your primary relationship, and learning how to do that and stay out of the affair, to keep the door closed with the affair, okay? If you're an addict, you've got to learn how to put down the compulsive behaviors that you've been using, to stop reaching for them, to manage your emotional world, to manage stress, to manage all the different things that might be going on for you. You've got to actually figure out how to become sober from those behaviors. This is, again, not a small task, right? This is a big task. So you've got to define sobriety. You've got to figure out what your sobriety definition is. You've got to do relapse planning. How are you going to stay out of danger zones? And that's important, whether it's an addiction or an affair. A person in an affair has to look at, what are the behaviors that made me vulnerable to this, and how do I change them, right? That's part of this stage for somebody who's in an affair. So you're defining sobriety, you're doing relapse prevention planning, and you're learning how to establish sobriety and stay sober, okay? That's a task. Then your third task is to actually stay sober, okay? So this is its own separate task, because establishing sobriety and getting long-term sobriety are two different things. So getting sober initially and then learning how to stay sober, that's the trick, right? Learning how to stay sober long-term. That's the real trick. So the third thing you're doing in therapy and in treatment is learning how to stay sober. And this looks like, I've got to learn how to manage triggers that come my way. I've got to learn how to manage stress. And I've got to learn other ways, new ways, that I care for myself instead of reaching for the addiction. So I've got to put new healthy behaviors in the place of my addiction. If you take out the addiction and you just leave a void, you're going right back to that addiction. So I've got to figure out how to put healthy behaviors in instead. I've got to maybe learn how to actually do self-care for the first time ever, because I've just used my addiction to care for myself. I now have all these feelings and emotions that before I always used the addiction to handle, right? I managed my emotions with the addiction. Now I'm not reaching for the addiction, and I've got all these feelings inside me and I don't know what to do with them. So now I've got to learn how to handle these feelings. And by the way, some of these feelings are super painful and super scary, because they're not just my feelings, but they're my betrayed partner's feelings, who's got all kinds of anger and pain that they're telling me about, and I don't know how to handle that either without the addiction. So I'm learning how to do this. So if it's a person who is dealing with an affair and not an addiction, they also have to learn how to stay out of the affair, not go back into it, because often people are really vulnerable to going back to the affair or to starting a new affair, right? Doing an old pattern of behavior, whatever it is that made you vulnerable in the first place to that, putting yourself right back there again and doing that again. So for somebody who's in an affair, they have to learn, what caused that for me? Like, what made that happen in my life? How do I shift things so that it doesn't happen again? And then how do I put my attention and focus back on my relationship and actually work on that and have that person be my person, right? Instead of siphoning my energy off to an affair partner. So that's all another task involved in staying sober and learning how to stay sober long term. Okay, that's a lot of stuff that I just said, right? That's a lot of stuff. So that is going to take some time to do. All right, and we're not done. We have a fourth task. So this one is actually happening all through the three tasks that I just talked about. all through the assessment and getting sober and learning how to stay sober is getting honest, right? Getting honest with yourself and getting honest with the therapist, the sponsor, your group, with other people, right? And getting honest with your spouse or your significant other, okay? So this last task is about learning to tell yourself the truth, learning to identify when you are lying to yourself and manipulating yourself, learning to tell the truth to others, to let people in to the secrets that you've had, to the things that you thought you would never tell anybody because they have shame attached to them. It's learning how to do that and learning how to build a community around you, a community of support that helps you stay sober. You cannot stay sober without a community. And who you learn to be honest with, and you learn to be transparent with, and you learn to let them know who you really are and see you in all of your warts and wonderful parts, and they get to see the whole thing, right? So all of that is a fourth task that's going on this whole time. That's about learning how to come into congruence with yourself, into wholeness or integrity, and to be honest about who you are and what's really been going on with you. And let me tell you, for most people, for most cheating partners, as they're doing all these tasks, as all this work is going on, most of the time they are doing a lot of bargaining around the honesty. So bargaining around the honesty looks like, okay, I'm going to tell this and this and this, but there's no way I'm telling this. This one is going with me to my grave, and it's okay. It can go with me to my grave because I'm being honest about everything else. It's not really that big a deal. This thing I'm holding back, it's not really that big a deal. You know, it's kind of inconsequential. They don't really need to know. I'm being honest about everything else. And so I'm in recovery. I'm doing what I'm being asked to do. I'm being honest, right? And it's okay that I'm holding this piece over here. So do you see how there's all that protection and self-manipulation going on around holding a piece away? This bargaining thing is normal. All people who have been dealing with cheating, who are in recovery, go through it, right? Because there is this process of coming to a place where you know, I really do have to tell the whole truth, and I really do have to let myself be fully known and fully seen, and invite other people into that. And it's a process of learning how to do that. It's a scary thing to do that. So all of that is what's going on before you start working on disclosure, okay? So starting to work on disclosure happens after everything I've just said. And everything that I have just talked about takes months to do. So this is usually a 5-6 month process at least for most people to get to the place where they would be ready to really work on writing their disclosure. And where they've really, I call it, you know, coming to Jesus about the honesty, where they've really come to Jesus about, I do have to tell all the secrets. Like they've wrestled the bargaining down, right? The part of them that was thinking, I'm going to hold that back, or I'm going to hold that back. They've wrestled that part down, and they've come to a place, they've shared enough repeatedly in therapy and in group and with the 12-step meetings where they've seen it's okay, I can share this and I'm okay, right? It doesn't destroy me to let people know me. I'm still here and I'm still okay, so I can be honest. That's a whole process for people. So we're now at like 5 or 6 months into treatment, and they're just starting to really work on their disclosure, okay? So I know that probably seems really long for you all as a betrayed partner, and we're going to talk about how you manage all of this in a minute, okay? But now they're starting to work on disclosure. So that in and of itself is a process. That in and of itself takes some time. Because when you're in the process of doing disclosure, now what we're saying to our clients is, okay, it's time to remember. It's time to remember the things that you tucked away, that you tried to forget, that you've defended against within yourself, that you've really tried to put behind a wall and never think of again. It's time to remember all those things. It's time to bring those out and really look at what's been happening. And we're going to write it down, and we're going to look at it together, and then we're going to rewrite it, and then we're going to rewrite it again until it's in a really clear and concise document that you can share with your partner, with a betrayed partner, and until we know that everything is here, right? All the secrets have been told, you've been fully honest, you've remembered everything that you've tucked away, and we can give your partner a full disclosure that's a real disclosure. All right, so when a person is in that process of writing the disclosure, now they have to face telling their partner the truth, right? They've kind of dealt with telling themselves the truth. They've learned how to tell their therapist the truth, their group the truth, their sponsor the truth. They've done that work. Now they've got to think through, I've got to really be honest with my partner. All these things that I'm terrified to share, I have to share them. And so some of what happens in the writing of the disclosure and in the work around it, it isn't just the work of writing it. It's the work of coming to a place of willingness to face shame. Like, I'm willing to emotionally feel the shame I have around these secrets, because when I tell them, I feel shame. So there's work around the shame, work around what happens when the shame comes up for the person, all of that. And then there's a ton of work with fear, because there's enormous fear in being that vulnerable. To share things that you feel ashamed of, to share things that you can't believe in your sober mind that you ever even really did. Though that the fear of that is not just the fear of losing the relationship. People do fear losing the relationship. That is a big fear for people. But even more than that, it's the fear of sharing that and seeing contempt or rejection or disgust or, hate on somebody's face when you share it. It's the fear of being found unworthy and unlovable and being rejected. That's the biggest fear. And so that's the fear that cheating partners are wrestling with when they're writing a disclosure and coming to a place where they're willing to face that fear and they're willing to do the work of being honest with their partner and facing the possibility that they could, in fact, experience some of those things as the betrayed partner is dealing with what they're hearing. All right, so again, it's all going to take some time, right? I keep saying this, it all takes time. It's all a process. So writing the disclosure takes weeks to do. You're doing many, many drafts of it. You're coming back to it and figuring out how to write it so it's clear and it's concise. Like, I'm always working with my addicted partners or cheating partners on, think about hearing this audibly. Like, think about having this read to you. Is it going to be clear? Is it going to make sense? Like, we don't want to read something that makes no sense to somebody. We want you as the betrayed partner to be able to hear it and take it in, right? So this is a writing project. And so there's work around just getting it done well and getting it on paper well as all the emotional work that I just talked about, okay? So it's going to take time to do all this. And that means that for you as the betrayed partner, you're now like 7 months past discovery, 8 months past discovery, like time is going by for you, right? And you came into treatment saying, I need disclosure. I need to know what has happened. I need to know what all the secrets are. I need to know where the disclosure begins and where the betrayal begins and where the betrayal ends, right? I gotta have this thing contained. I have to know so that I don't keep imagining horrific things or imagining things that didn't happen and not knowing what really went on in my relationship. Like, I have not known what the truth is about my relationship, and I need to know that. So you're coming day one of treatment, usually saying, I need this. And to find out, I'm going to have to wait to get this thing that I feel like I urgently need and I have a right to, that is really a difficult pill to swallow. And I know that is. It's hard to be told that you have to wait for something that you really do have a right to know and that you really do need to know. So here's what happens though when you don't wait. So I want to talk about when you don't let this process unfold the way that it needs to, and you come in, and we've had this happen at the center, people come in and they just insist that there's disclosure, by the end of this month, we're doing disclosure, they're very insistent about it. And we're not really, we don't usually let people do it because we just won't participate in a process that includes harming somebody. And so we have kind of a pretty hard line around that because we don't want to participate in harm. We want to participate in healing. But I understand where that's coming from for people, why the urgency is there for the betrayed partner. So when you do not wait, when you rush this process, what you end up with is you end up getting another round of discovery instead of actual disclosure. So discovery is partial truth dripped out over time, right? Discovery is, here's another tidbit, here's another little bit of information, here's another bunch of information. And oh, by the way, I've told you the whole truth this time. There's nothing more for me to tell you, when in fact, there is more. They haven't told you the whole truth. They've still got the secrets. They've still got all of that. And now you've just gone through another round of betrayal, right? Discovery is always another round of betrayal because you're finding out there's more when you've always been told that there isn't, right? You're finding out there's been more lying. You're finding out there's been more cheating. So it always includes more betrayal and a deepening of the harm and in the relationship, and it always makes your trauma symptoms worse, right? It deepens the trauma and amplifies your trauma symptoms that you're dealing with. So when you do not wait and you rush ahead, you're going to almost always get more discovery and not actually get disclosure. And it's going to result in more harm for you, an increase of your trauma symptoms. And here's the other thing is when you're pushing for that and you're not providing room for the cheating partner to go through all the steps that I just said they need to go through, right? They're not going through the process of treatment the way they need to. You may get more information about what has happened, but what you are not getting is any kind of heart change or mind change on the part of your partner. When people go through the process of dealing with their denial, identifying how to be sober, understanding what drove the behaviors in the first place, learning how to stay sober long term, getting honest, wrestling down the need to be honest, to face their fear about rejection and shame. When they do that process, it changes them, right? This is a change process the person is in, and it is changing how they think about things. It is changing their willingness and their investment in the relationship, what they're willing to do on behalf of the relationship, on behalf of their own selves. There is a heart and a mind change that is happening. And this heart and mind change is what you as a betrayed partner actually really want. I mean, you want the information, but more than that, you want to see your partner's heart and mind change and move away from what they've been embroiled in and move back to being able to be in relationship in a healthy way. So when you rush the process, you make it so that something is happening on paper, the boxes are getting checked, but there's no heart and mind change that's actually occurring. And so you want to give it the space and time for that to be happening, and it will be well worth the wait if all of that is happening when you do come to disclosure. Okay, so this is why it takes so long, right? I've kind of spelled out, why does disclosure take so long? Why can't we just get it done? And what the issues are if you rush it, how it's harmful for you if you rush it. So let's talk about how you actually wait. Like, what do you do if you're coming into treatment and you need this information and you understand, okay, I got to kind of sit through this process, but that's months of me not knowing. That's months of me not knowing exactly what has happened here. So what am I supposed to do with that? How am I supposed to deal with that? Okay, so let's talk about that. I have some steps for you, okay? So step one is when you come into treatment, you want to be very clear about the fact that you do need disclosure. So you want to be clear with your partner about that you understand treatment as a process, but that you are going to need a full and honest disclosure from them in the not too distant future. And you want to make sure you tell your therapist that. If you meet with the partner's therapist with them, you tell him that, him or her that. You tell everybody, here's what I need, right? And you're very clear about that. This is a need I have, and I'm expecting that we're all heading toward this. Okay, step 1. Step 2, this is the hardest one. Step 2, you stop asking for information, okay? You stop grilling your partner. You stop Sherlocking to find more. You stop trying to find more drips and drabs of information. Because what you are doing when you're doing that is you're actually asking for more discovery. You're asking, tell me another little bit that you've lied about, and then you're going to tell me that it's all there is. You're asking to go back into that washing machine of betrayal and do another round. So part of your job is to set a boundary with yourself that you are going to wait for disclosure. You're going to trust the process. You're going to wait for disclosure, and you're not going to keep trying to find things out in the meantime, because you know that it will harm you and amplify your trauma symptoms if you do that. Okay? That's step 2. I know that's a hard step. Step 3. Now you're in a waiting period, right? You're in treatment, but now you've got to sort of wait for disclosure. So during this time, you need to decide what level of relational connection you can tolerate with your partner while you still don't know the extent of the betrayal, okay? So you don't know exactly everything that happened. You usually have some information. You usually have quite a bit of information, but you don't know the full extent of it. You don't know all of it. So you have to decide what feels safe for me given this reality that I'm going to be waiting on this now for a few months while we get into treatment and do everything that we've just talked about. This is going to be different for everybody, and you have to decide for you, okay? Nobody else can really tell you this. You've got to figure this out. Your therapist can help you sort it through and make good decisions for yourself. You can talk to other people and get ideas for what they've done during this time, but only you can decide what really can I tolerate and what feels safe or unsafe for me. So for some betrayed partners, they will decide, I need minimal contact. I'm going to ask you to move out of the house until we do disclosure, and we'll just have contact around, running the house, dealing with the kids, that kind of thing. And other than that, we won't have too much contact until we get through that. For other people, they're like, I can live in the house with you, but let's be in separate bedrooms. Let's have some distance. Let's co-parent. Let's run the house together. We can talk about things, some, but I don't want to get into big emotional discussions with you too much until I know what's happening here. I want to keep my distance a little bit until I really know what's gone on. Other people are going to be like, I can sleep in the same bed with you. I can co-parent with you. I can kind of keep doing life with you, but I don't want to be sexual with you. I don't want to have physical affection with you. I don't feel safe enough to do that until I know exactly what's gone on here. So I need that level of boundary in place. For other people, they're going to be able to be sexual. They're going to be able to be in their relationship while they wait. Everybody is different. You're allowed to be wherever you are, okay? Whatever you need on this is what you need on it. So you have to decide, though, what will help me feel safe while I'm waiting? What level of connection can I tolerate while I'm waiting for this information? Because I don't have all the story right now. And that means things for me and how much I can invest or connect to my partner. So you have a decision to make, and you need to think that through and then set appropriate boundaries around what's going to help you get through the months to come while you're waiting for full disclosure. Okay? Last thing, step 4, is you want to stay in awareness about whether your partner is actually doing their part. Okay? So what this means is you've entered into treatment, you understand there's all this work to do, but you're watching to see, is my partner attending therapy, attending group? Do I hear them say, hey, sorry, I got to take this, it's my sponsor, and go get on the phone with their sponsor? Do I see them doing homework? Do they see them doing the assignments? Because believe me, they're being given homework in therapy. So are they working on their homework? Do I see them working on the disclosure document, writing the disclosure document? If they're at that place, are they working on it? So you should be able to see as a betrayed partner that your significant other is doing things. You're going to see their behaviors change, and you're going to see the time and energy that they're investing in treatment. And that also will help you wait for disclosure, because you'll begin to see things shift and change, and you'll see that they're invested and they're working on it. If they are not doing their part, then what I recommend that you do, if you're kind of looking at this and you're not seeing these things, is I would ask for a therapy session with your therapist, their therapist, your partner, and you, with the four of you. And I would say, hey, I need to have a conversation here about, I'm hearing, yes, I'm doing treatment. I'm hearing, yes, I'm committed to doing disclosure, but I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing them attend therapy. I'm not seeing them do their homework. I'm not seeing them talk to a sponsor. I'm not seeing them work on the stuff. I'm not seeing any of it. So I need to have a meeting to kind of figure out, like, where are we and what's happening. So I would recommend that you do that. If, you've given it some time, give it some time, but if you've given it some time and you're not seeing that, then have that kind of meeting. Because sometimes this happens, sometimes disclosure takes even longer than what I've said here. And usually when that happens, there are very specific reasons for it. And the therapist should be able to tell you why. So your therapist should be talking to your partner's therapist. They should be discussing things, and you should be really clear about why that is happening. So for example, I've worked with clients where it's taken longer because the client is having trouble getting sober. And I've had to say, hey, disclosure is delayed because we've just got to get sobriety in place. We've got to put all our attention and focus on that right now. And we've got to solve the issues that are going on here, that the person's not able to get sober and stay sober. So that kind of thing could cause it. Another kind of thing, it would be that the person has more than just an addiction going on. Let's say they have a mood disorder, or they have some OCD. They have some other things that also are trying to get addressed and that we're trying to stabilize in order to be able to do disclosure. So if that is going on, that's like a real clear reason. And again, you can be given these reasons, right? It should be really clear to you why disclosure is being delayed if it's taking a lot longer than what I'm talking about here. All right, so if you're a year and a half in, disclosure hasn't happened, the therapists are saying we're working on it, and it just keeps dragging on, here's what you can know. It is not the therapist. That's the problem. It is the client that's the issue. And what's happening usually in those cases is that the therapist is leading the horse to water over and over and over and over again, and the horse is not drinking. So the therapist is probably working their tail off, trying to get the client to work on this disclosure and do what they need to do. And the client is probably not doing it, coming in every time, didn't work on it, forgot my document, didn't do this. Oh, by the way, we have this little drama at home to deal with instead. They're doing all this kind of stuff to avoid it. So again, if that's the case, ask for another meeting and then start thinking about some boundaries that you might want to set for yourself around the fact that it's not getting done. Okay, but that's, again, if it's really dragging on for a really long time, okay? All right, so here's what I want to also just say to you all, that I know that it's really hard to think about waiting on disclosure and going through several months where you have to have boundaries with your partner and really think about staying a little disconnected from them emotionally because you don't know the whole story yet. It is really worth it to do that. It is really worth the wait. And so I want to talk to you about why it is worth the wait, okay? When you get a full and real disclosure where your partner comes and really does tell you the whole truth, and they haven't, kept some big old secret in the closet, right? They've told you the whole truth. It reestablishes a foundation of honesty in your relationship. And when you've waited for that to happen, and you haven't gone through all the rounds of discovery and the trickle truth and the death by paper cut that happens with that, you've saved yourself all kinds of betrayal and all kinds of trauma. And then disclosure is able to really be a pivot point often for people, where disclosure feels very different from what happened initially with discovery, right? Disclosure should feel very, very different. And you're having a disclosure where you're having the experience of your partner coming and being honest and vulnerable and transparent with you. They face their fear of rejection. They face their fear that they might be found unworthy. They face their shame. And they're coming to take this risk and to be fully honest and give you all this information that you really, really need. So it is worth the wait to get that kind of disclosure and have that kind of experience happen. So when that happens, your partner often has had a heart and mind change. They haven't just checked the box. It's really changed who they are and how they're operating and how they're thinking about things. And so then they're coming to this conversation in a very different way, and you get to have the experience of experiencing them differently. You can feel the heart change, the mind change, the different orientation that they are leaning toward you and toward the relationship rather than away from you and toward the addiction or the affair partner. All right, it gives you, the last thing that it does is, second thing is that it limits your trauma symptoms. We've already said this. It's going to limit your trauma symptoms if you wait on disclosure and let the process unfold. Third thing that it's going to do is it's going to give you time and space for your own healing. And I know this might seem weird because you might be thinking to yourself, well, I need this information before I can heal. Like, I can't heal until I know this. But that is actually not true. And when you have some time before disclosure, what it gives you is it gives you the time to be in your own process, your own therapy, etc., and to deal with the shock, right? Often betrayed partners are in shock about what has happened. And shock is actually a physiological state in your body, right? So it gives you time to process through the shock, come out of the shock, and begin to absorb what you know so far, right? Begin to process what you know so far. So in our Braving Hope program, just this last Monday night, one of the women said to me, she said, I'm headed toward disclosure. What can I do to build my resilience as I'm waiting on disclosure? And my answer to her was, work with your therapist on processing and grieving and dealing with what you already know. Because when you do that with the information you already have, that process builds your internal resilience to be able to handle anything else that's coming. So the process of dealing with what you do know is what actually builds your resources so that you can manage and cope and deal with the emotions and all of it that might be coming as you learn more. So waiting for disclosure gives you the opportunity to do that work. And then when disclosure happens, you've got skills and coping and resources inside of you that you didn't have at the very beginning. And that helps you deal with what you hear and deal with how to make decisions for yourself, how to think about it for yourself. It just helps you with all of that, okay? So waiting on disclosure ultimately really will benefit you because you are going to have a very different experience when you do that than if you push and rush and try to do it at the very beginning of things. Okay, so I've just said a lot. And I hope that it's helpful for you because I know this is a big thorny issue because the need is so acute for disclosure. And I hear partners say, like, why is it taking so long? And so I hope this helps you understand why it does take some time and why it is worth waiting for it, why it's worth giving it the time and not rushing it, because that process is how true change really happens in your partner and in your relationship and in you. All right. So I hope this has helped you and helped you have a different perspective on it. And I will see you all next time. Bye.